Mr. Serrano has waited a long time. Mr. Serrano, we've had a number of rounds. Please feel free to ask your questions. We'll give you plenty of time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late. I was interesting enough at a hearing where we were discussing compensation for the victims of 9/11. Mr. Attorney General, I am in a very, very unique or small minority. I'm the only elected official in New York who still thinks it's fine to have those trials in New York. And I think it's important to know why I feel that way, but it's also important to know how it came to be what it is now. When it was first floated or introduced as a thought that we could do this in New York, everyone I remember was in favor of it, and everybody said it was the right thing to do. And then something happened, and what it happened is not what people throughout the country think happened. It wasn't the community that spoke up. It wasn't elected officials. It was the business community that said they were concerned about traffic jams in Lower Manhattan. Traffic jams in New York City, that's redundant. This should not be a shock to anybody. Ironically, the people who lost so much business during the attacks and the aftermath of the attacks were now complaining about this congestion in downtown Manhattan. And little by little, you began to see this turning around of elected officials, colleagues of mine, friends of mine, people I've served with for many years, who were rah, rah, rah for having them in New York, and then all of a sudden they're all against it. Next thing you knew, something which I still don't understand, but I respect, the families of victims turned against having the trials in New York. Somehow this was an insult to their memory to do it in New York. I see the world differently. The best respect you can pay victims is to say that as a country, they may have killed some of us, they have maimed many of us, but they have not defeated us as a country. And they were not afraid to try people at the scene of the crime. And they were not afraid to try them within our court system. That's the way I feel. I was one of the few elected officials who was not in Washington that day. I was in New York City. My son, who's now a state senator, was running for the city council. Very few people wrote about the fact that elections were interrupted midday. Amongst all the things the terrorists accomplished, one was to disrupt an election, which stands at the center of our democracy. And I remember the pain that day and the aftermath of that pain and everything that we're still discussing today. And yet there's this feeling that somehow if we do it in a civilian court and if we do it in New York, we're dishonoring these folks and we're opening ourselves to more terrorist attack. Well, if there are people who are upset at the fact that we're going to put people on trial, does it matter whether we put them on trial in New York, in Duluth, Minnesota, or in Waukegan, Illinois, with all respect to Duluth and Waukegan? They're going to be angry regardless of what we do. If we do it in a military court, they'll be angry. If they do it in a civilian court, they'll be angry. If they're going to be angry, they're going to be angry. And if New York City is going to be under the possibility of an attack because of that, I would submit to all of us that New York City lives with the understanding that it is still the main target for any terrorist group. It is the main target. It is the Big Apple that people love to hate, but it is a symbol of who we are as a country, of the bigness and the strengths and the financial community. And so I know when an issue has left me, and it's not one I'm going to devote a lot of time to in the next few months. That train may have left the station already. In fact, I think it has, because every elected official now thinks this is the worst thing you could do. But at least know that there's one elected official in New York City who feels that there was nothing wrong with trying them there. On the contrary, I thought it was very dramatic to say, we're not afraid of you. We will try you at the scene of the crime. We will try you in our courts, and we'll show you that you can't defeat our judicial system and you can't defeat us as a people. And I just wanted to make that statement to you, sir.
Well, thank you, sir. I mean, for those who don't know, I was born and raised in New York City. I was born in the Bronx, spent my first years in Manhattan, raised largely in Queens, went to high school, college, and law school in Manhattan. I'm a New Yorker. My brother lost many people. He's a Port Authority, retired Port Authority lieutenant. He lost colleagues, people who went to training school with him that day. The decision that I made, I thought was the right one for that case, but there was, very frankly, an emotional component to that as well. And what was I doing to my city? I think that the decision that I made was good for the case, and ultimately that's what I had to focus on. But I appreciate the observations that, that you have made. I think that we should have great faith in the resilience of our systems, the resilience of our people, and the toughness that has always separated Americans from other peoples in this world. And what's made this country great, you might be right that the train has left the station. It is certainly a factor that we are working with as we try to determine where this trial should occur. But just on a very personal level, that's what at least was a part of my my thinking.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, do I have time to ask a question?
You have
Okay.
all the time you want. Go.
Thank you. We discussed this in the past. It keeps growing as an issue, and that's hate crimes against immigrants. As we get closer to perhaps discussing immigration, as the economy continues to hurt, as we continue deportations and raids, I think it could only get worse before it gets better. I know you've been strong on trying to do something about this whole issue, but I think we need to continue to call the attention of this Congress and the American people to the fact that there is another category of hate crimes, and that's people who are attacked because they are immigrants, because they look like immigrants, because somehow before they're attacked no one asks whether they're here legally or not, whether that doesn't make a difference, but it encompasses a lot of people. And again, I want to be clear, what I was saying was not that because you're illegal you should be attacked, but it doesn't matter to people. If you're an immigrant or you look like an immigrant, they're going to attack. And it's something that we have to deal with, and I'm wondering just what new programs are you putting in place and new actions that the Justice Department will be looking at as we deal with this very serious issue?
Well, we certainly have a new tool, a very substantial tool, the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Act that was finally passed. I've testified in behalf of that statute when I was Deputy Attorney General about 10 or 11 years ago. It was finally passed in October of last year. That gives us tools that we didn't have before. And so that is a tool that we will use to get at the kinds of victims, people who are victimized in the way that you have described. We have in our budget for next year a $1.4 million increase so that we can hire 14 attorneys in our Civil Rights Division. This is a priority for this division. Tom Perez is the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division. He's energized that place. He has the division focusing on the things that it has traditionally been focused on. And hate crimes prevention, hate crimes prosecutions are one of the key things that I've asked Tom to focus on in the Civil Rights Division. And I'm confident that with these additional lawyers and with this additional statute that we will be successful. But that is a priority for us.
I thank you for that, and I just, again, reiterate the obvious, that the President has said publicly, and he certainly told members of Congress that went to see him last Friday, that he wants to work on an immigration reform bill. And that's great news, continues to be great news. But as you know, that will only inspire a few people in this country to commit even more hate crimes, because somehow those people are going to be legalized and they have to be dealt with and taught a lesson. So I would hope that we stay very vigilant as this period takes place. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Serrano.